What have you done to him? Ma'am, please calm down.
Let's all take a breath here.
He needs rest.
They say the slap echoed through the entire hospital corridor. What no one noticed was the way the nurse's hand trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. Because within 72 hours, the woman who raised her hand would lose everything. Her reputation, her wealth, her freedom. And the nurse? She wouldn't lift a finger. She didn't have to. Because the man she was engaged to, the man who called her every night at exactly 10 p.m., the man whose name was whispered in boardrooms from Seoul to New York, the man whose family had built empires on loyalty and buried enemies in silence, he'd already started counting down. 72 hours. That's all it took to dismantle a life built on arrogance. The slap happened on a Tuesday. By Friday, Margaret Whitmore would learn that some people you underestimate are connected to forces you can't survive. It started in the ER. Emergency room. Chaos. Organized chaos. Nurses moving with practiced efficiency. Doctors calling orders. Patients waiting. Hurting. Bleeding. And in the middle of it all, Nia Okafor. Brilliant. Calm. 28 years old and already one of the best trauma nurses in the city. She didn't see skin color. Didn't see wealth. Didn't see status. She saw vitals. Saw injuries. Saw who needed help first. That's why when Margaret Whitmore stormed in, designer bag, diamond rings, entitled fury radiating off her like heat, demanding immediate attention for her son's sprained ankle, Nia did what she always did. Triaged. Ma'am, we'll get to your son. But there are critical patients ahead of you. Please wait in the designated area. Margaret's face flushed. Do you know who I am? I know you're someone whose son has a minor injury while we have a car accident victim coding in room 3. So yes, you'll wait. I donate to this hospital. Millions. Your salary comes from people like me. And my training saves people like your son. He'll be seen. In order. That's how emergency rooms work. That's when it happened. Margaret's hand flew. Caught Nia across the face. Hard. The ring on her finger, 3-carat diamond, cut Nia's lip. Blood. Immediate. The corridor went silent. Nurses froze. Patients stared. Security started moving. But Nia didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't even raise her voice. She touched her lip. Looked at the blood on her fingers. Then looked at Margaret with eyes so calm it was terrifying. I'll finish my shift, she said quietly. Then walked back into the trauma bay. Left Margaret standing there. Victorious. Smug. Completely unaware she just signed her own death warrant. If you're still watching right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe to our channel for stories that can make you smile, and can also make you cry for absolute strangers. Now, let's get into the story. The ER had been running at capacity for 6 hours. Gunshot wound. 2 car accidents. An overdose that required 4 rounds of Narcan. Nia had been on her feet since 7 a.m. It was now past 2 p.m. She hadn't eaten. Hadn't sat. Hadn't stopped. That's what being short-staffed meant. That's what emergency medicine was. You moved until you couldn't. Then you moved anyway. She was checking vitals on a stroke patient when the commotion started. Shouting. Designer heels clicking fast on linoleum. Security trying to intercede. Ma'am, you need to check in at registration. I don't need to check in anywhere. My son needs immediate attention. Margaret Whitmore. Nia recognized her from hospital galas. Major donor. Her face was on a plaque in the main lobby. Gave millions. Expected worship in return. She was dragging a teenage boy by the arm. He looked embarrassed. Mom, it's just a sprained ankle. It could be broken. We're not waiting. Nia stepped forward. Calm. Professional. Ma'am, I'm Nurse Okafor. I'll need to assess your son and determine priority. Priority? Look at him. He's in pain. The boy wasn't in pain. He was mortified. Nia had seen enough fake injuries to know. I understand. But we have critical patients. Life-threatening situations. Your son will be seen, but not before. Do you know who I am? Yes, ma'am. And hospital protocol applies to everyone equally. I donated $5 million to this hospital last year. Your salary comes from my generosity. And my training keeps people alive. Your son has a sprained ankle. The man in room 3 has internal bleeding from a car accident. Who do you think gets priority? Margaret's face went purple. How dare you speak to me, with honesty? That's my job. That's when Margaret's hand flew. Fast. Vicious. The slap echoed. Her diamond ring caught Nia's lip. Split it open. Blood immediately. The ER went silent. Everyone stopped. Stared. Margaret stood there. Breathing hard. Righteous. Nia touched her lip. Looked at the blood on her fingers. The pain was sharp but manageable. She'd felt worse. Done worse to herself staying awake through double shifts. She met Margaret's eyes. I'll finish my shift. Then turned. Walked back to her stroke patient. Left Margaret standing there victorious. And completely unaware what she just started. Dr. Elias Monroe arrived within minutes. Hospital director. Mid-50s. Expensive suit. Political smile. He went straight to Margaret. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry about this incident. That woman assaulted me with her insubordination. I want her fired. And I want my lawyers contacted. Of course. We'll handle this immediately. He turned to Nia. She was still working. Hands steady despite the blood on her lip. Nurse Okafor. My office. Now. I have patients. Other staff will cover. Come with me. Security appeared. 2 guards. Not aggressive. Just present. The message was clear. Nia set down her clipboard. Walked past Margaret without looking at her. Past the other nurses who wouldn't meet her eyes. Past patients who'd watched the whole thing. Dr. Monroe's office was cold. Impersonal. He sat behind his desk. Nia stood. Mrs. Whitmore is threatening legal action. Against you. Against the hospital. For what? Doing my job? For creating a hostile environment. For discrimination. She slapped me. She says you were disrespectful. Refused to treat her son. Made her feel unwelcome. The word hung. Unwelcome. Code 4, you made a rich white woman uncomfortable. I triaged her son. Standard protocol. She didn't like waiting. She's a major donor, Nia. We can't afford to lose her support. So you're taking her side? I'm protecting the hospital. Which means you're suspended. Pending investigation. I was assaulted. You escalated a situation. Take the rest of the day. We'll discuss next steps tomorrow. He didn't apologize. Didn't ask if she was okay. Just dismissed her like she was the problem. Nia walked out. Past security. Past Margaret, who was giving a statement to hospital administrators. Past the ER where her colleagues pretended not to see her leave. She made it to the parking lot before pulling out her phone. One contact. Saved simply as JS. She typed one word. Handled. Then drove home. And waited. Because she knew what came next. Had known the moment Margaret's hand connected. Had chosen restraint. Had chosen silence. Not because she was weak. Because she was engaged to someone who didn't need her to fight her own battles. He'd been waiting for an excuse. She'd just given him one. Seoul. 9 a.m. local time. 23 hours ahead of New York. Kang Joon-Seok sat at the head of a glass conference table. 12 executives. 4 lawyers. 2 translators. They were discussing a merger. Tech company acquisition. $50 million. Standard Tuesday. His phone buzzed. Once. He glanced at it. One word on the screen. Handled. The executives kept talking. Numbers. Projections. Market analysis. Joon-Seok wasn't listening anymore. Handled had a specific meaning. They'd established the code 2 years ago, when she first started working in the ER. When he'd realized his world and hers would inevitably collide. Handled meant, something happened, I'm safe, but you need to know. He stood. Mid-presentation. The room went silent. We're done here. His assistant, young, efficient, terrified of him, spoke carefully. Sir, we haven't finalized. I said we're done. Postpone everything. Indefinitely. The merger has a deadline, then they'll wait. Or they'll find another buyer. I don't care which. He walked out. Pulled out his phone. Didn't call her. Never called when she used that word. Calling meant questions. Questions meant she'd have to explain. She'd explain when she was ready. Instead, he opened a different contact. No name. Just a number. Typed 3 words. Start the clock. The response came immediately. Confirmed. 72 hours. He pocketed the phone. His assistant followed him down the hallway. Sir, your afternoon schedule, clear it. The board meeting, cancel it. Your father expects, my father will understand. He stopped. Turned. The assistant nearly ran into him. Book a flight. New York. Soonest available. Private terminal. And get me everything on New York Presbyterian Hospital. Donors. Board members. Staff complaints. Everything. What am I looking for? You'll know when you find it. He continued walking. Behind him, the assistant was already making calls. Rearranging schedules. Mobilizing resources. People didn't question Joon-Seok's orders. They executed them. In his office, he pulled up surveillance access. Not illegal. Just resourceful. His family had investments everywhere. Including security companies. Including hospitals. He found New York Presbyterian's network. Scrolled through today's footage. Found the ER. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. He watched. A woman in designer clothes. A nurse, his nurse, Nia, standing calm. Professional. The conversation escalating. Then the slap. His jaw tightened. He watched Nia touch her lip. Blood. Watched her say something he couldn't hear. Watched her walk away. Watched the woman stand there. Victorious. He replayed it. Froze on the woman's face. Ran facial recognition. Margaret Whitmore. 52. Married to Frederick Whitmore. Hedge fund manager. Net worth, $340 million. Donated heavily to hospitals, museums, political campaigns. Influential. Connected. Untouchable. For now. He made another call. This one to his cousin? Yuna answered on the first ring. I was wondering when you'd call. You saw? I see everything. The footage is already backed up. 3 locations. Encrypted. Good. I need a full workup. Financial. Legal. Social. Everything she values. Everything she's built. I want to know where the cracks are. And then? Then we press until it shatters. June, this is public. Witnesses. It'll draw attention. I don't care about attention. Someone put hands on her. That doesn't go unanswered. Your father won't approve. My father taught me that loyalty is everything. She's mine. That makes this family business. Silence. Then, 72 hours? 68 now. Clock started when she texted. I'll have everything by tonight. He hung up. Looked at the frozen image on his screen. Margaret Whitmore's hand mid-swing. Nia's face. That moment before impact when everything changed. He didn't know Margaret. Didn't care about her money or her influence, or her connections. All he knew was this, she'd made a mistake. She'd touched someone under his protection. And in his world, that mistake had a price. He just had to decide how much she could afford to pay. Spoiler, it was everything. 24 hours after the slap. Wednesday morning. Dr. Monroe arrived to find an email from the State Department of Health. Subject line: Routine audit request. Nothing about it was routine. They wanted donor records, conflict of interest disclosures, incident reports involving staff and benefactors. Timeline: 2 weeks. His coffee went cold while he read it 3 times. Tried to find the angle, the loophole. Found none. His assistant knocked. "Sir, there's a reporter on line 2. Says she's following up on a workplace safety complaint. We don't comment on pending investigations. She specifically asked about Mrs. Whitmore and Nurse Okafor by name." His stomach dropped. How does she know those names? She wouldn't say. But she's from the Times. The New York Times. Not a local blogger. Not hospital newsletter. The actual Times. Tell her no comment. And find out who leaked this. But he already knew. Someone had wanted this public. Someone with resources. Someone deliberate. Margaret called him an hour later. "Elias, darling, I'm getting calls. Reporters. Asking about some incident at the hospital? It's being handled? I have a lunch today. A charity board meeting. I can't have my name attached to scandal. There's no scandal. Just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? That woman provoked me. Disrespected me. I was defending my son. Of course. And we're addressing it internally. Internally? I want her fired. Publicly. I want a statement saying the hospital doesn't tolerate staff who, Margaret, we have to follow process. Legal requirements. Union rules. I donated $5 million. That buys me more than process. And we're grateful. But right now, the best thing is to let this quiet down. Quiet down. You quiet it down, Elias. Or I'll find a hospital that values my contributions." She hung up. He sat in his office, trapped between a donor who demanded blood and a situation that was metastasizing faster than he could contain. That afternoon, Nia received a visitor. Hospital lawyer. Mid-40s. Sympathetic smile. Briefcase. "Ms. Okafor, thank you for meeting with me. I didn't have a choice. You sent security to escort me here. I apologize for the formality. We want to resolve this situation. Amicably." "Resolve what?" "I was assaulted. At work. In front of witnesses." "Yes. And we take that very seriously. Which is why we'd like to offer you a settlement." He opened the briefcase. Pulled out papers. 6 months' salary. Full benefits. Confidential separation. You sign an NDA. We provide a glowing reference. You move on. Everyone wins. Separation? You're firing me? We're offering you an opportunity to transition gracefully. For being slapped? For your own protection. Mrs. Whitmore is litigious. This could drag on for months. Depositions. Lawyers. Media attention. Or you take this. Start fresh. Somewhere the incident won't follow you. Nia looked at the papers. The number. More money than she'd see in 6 months. More than enough to walk away clean. She pushed them back. "No. Ms. Okafor, please think about. I have thought about it. The answer is no. This is a generous offer. This is hush money. You're paying me to disappear so she doesn't have to face consequences. We're trying to protect you. You're trying to protect your donor. There's a difference. If you don't take this, things could get very difficult. They're already difficult. I got assaulted. Suspended. Blamed. And now you're offering me money to pretend it didn't happen." She stood. "This isn't about money. It never was." She walked out. Left the lawyer sitting there. Papers unsigned. Offer rejected. And somewhere in Seoul, Joon-Seok got a text from his cousin. She refused the settlement. 48 hours remain. He smiled. Because that's exactly what he'd expected. Nia didn't bend. Didn't break. Didn't compromise. That's why he'd chosen her. That's why he'd protect her. And that's why Margaret Whitmore's time was running out. If you're still watching, drop a still watching in the comments, because this next part changes everything. 48 hours after the slap. Thursday. The unraveling began quietly. Margaret woke to emails. Her charity board. Emergency meeting called. Concerns about financial irregularities. She deleted it. Someone was clearly confused. By noon, it wasn't confusion. The IRS sent a letter. Audit notice. Her foundation. Donations. Tax-exempt status under review. She called her accountant. Voicemail. Called her lawyer. In a meeting. Called her husband. I'm sure it's nothing. Just cooperate. But it wasn't nothing. Detective Han Min-jae reopened a file that afternoon. Cold case. 3 years old. Patient death at New York Presbyterian. Malpractice suspected. Never prosecuted. Why? Because the family had been paid off. Quietly. Generously. By a donor who didn't want investigation damaging the hospital's reputation. That donor's name, Margaret Whitmore. The detective made calls. Found the family. Found out they'd wanted justice, not money. But pressure had been applied. Jobs threatened. Immigration status questioned. They'd taken the settlement. Signed the NDA. Buried their grief. He reopened it anyway. Because an anonymous tip had provided new evidence. Documents. Emails. Proof of intimidation. Proof of cover-up. Proof that money had silenced truth. The hospital's legal team got the notice. Panic. Margaret got a call. We need to discuss your involvement in the Patterson case. That was settled years ago. It's being reopened. Criminal investigation. Obstruction of justice. Witness tampering. If convicted. She hung up. This was a mistake. Had to be. Someone was targeting her. But who? Thursday evening. Margaret's phone rang. Society friends. Canceling lunch dates. Something's come up. Her charity gala. Major donors pulling out. We're reallocating funds this year. Her club membership. We're reviewing all members. Routine. Routine. Nothing about this was routine. She tried calling Dr. Monroe. Straight to voicemail. Tried her lawyer again. I'll call you back. Tried her husband. Margaret, people are asking questions. About the foundation. About that incident at the hospital. Maybe you should lie low for a while. Lie low. Like she was the problem. 24 hours left. Friday morning. Margaret's bank called. Her accounts. Frozen. Federal investigation. She couldn't access her money. Couldn't transfer funds. Couldn't write checks. This is a mistake. No mistake, ma'am. Court order. You'll need to speak with federal investigators. She hadn't eaten. Hadn't slept. Reporters were calling. Photographers outside her building. Her doorman avoiding eye contact. Everything was collapsing. And she couldn't understand why. It was just a slap. Just a nurse. Just someone who needed to be reminded of her place. How had this happened? She pulled up every news article. Every leaked document. Every anonymous tip. Tried to trace the pattern. Find the source. But there was no pattern. Just chaos. Systematic. Professional. Thorough. Someone with resources. With reach. With patience. Someone who'd waited. Watched. Then moved with surgical precision. She finally asked the question out loud. Sitting alone in her penthouse. Surrounded by wealth that suddenly felt like a prison. Who is that nurse? Not what had she done. Not how to fix this. But who? Because Margaret finally understood. This wasn't random. This wasn't bad luck. This was retaliation. Someone had come for her. Someone she'd never seen. Someone protecting a nurse she'd dismissed as nobody. And Margaret Whitmore, socialite, philanthropist, untouchable queen of Manhattan's elite, was about to find out exactly who she'd underestimated. The penthouse felt colder than it had 48 hours ago. Margaret sat at her mahogany desk, her hands trembling as she stared at the private investigator's file delivered by a courier who had demanded cash up front. She had spent a lifetime navigating the power structures of Manhattan, but as she flipped through the pages, the floor seemed to vanish beneath her. There was no record of Nia Okafor being a nobody. Every lead pointed back to a ghost wall of shell companies and high-level security clearances. Then she saw the photo, a grainy shot from a gala in Seoul 6 months prior. Nia was there, but she wasn't in a uniform. She was draped in silk, her hand tucked into the arm of a man whose face sent a jolt of pure ice through Margaret's veins. Kang Joon-Seok, the heir to the Kang Global Group. The man the financial world called the architect, because he built empires and dismantled rivals with equal indifference. The realization hit her like the slap she had delivered on Tuesday. She hadn't just offended a member of the staff, she had assaulted the future matriarch of a dynasty that owned the very debt her husband's hedge fund was currently drowning in. The doorbell rang. It wasn't the police. It was Yoona, Joon-Seok's cousin, standing in the foyer with a poise that made Margaret's designer suit look like rags. Margaret rushed toward her, her voice high and frantic. "I didn't know. Please tell him. I'll make a donation. 10 million. I'll issue a public apology to the girl. I'll make it right." Yoona didn't move. She didn't even blink. She simply looked at the red, split lip on Nia's face in the photo on the desk and then back at Margaret with a look of profound pity. "A donation?" Yoona asked, her voice like velvet-wrapped steel. "You think this is about money? You think you can buy back the dignity of the woman he loves?" "I was stressed. My son was hurt," Margaret began, her eyes brimming with the first real tears of her adult life. Yoona stepped forward, closing the distance until the power in the room shifted entirely. "You made a fundamental error, Margaret. You thought the uniform defined the woman. You thought your status gave you the right to touch what wasn't yours." Yoona's smile was ghost-thin and utterly lethal. "You didn't slap a nurse. You insulted a dynasty. And in our world, dynasties don't accept apologies. They accept titles, deeds, and total surrender." As Yoona turned to leave, Margaret's phone chimed. A final notification from her bank, account status, terminated. The 72 hours weren't up yet, but for Margaret Whitmore, the sun had already set. The private jet had barely taxied to a halt before Joon-Seok was in the back of a black sedan, his face a mask of cold, focused rage. By the time he reached his Manhattan penthouse, his father, Chairman Kang, was already on the screen of his monitor via an encrypted line from Seoul. The older man's voice was like grinding stones. "The Whitmores are finished, but that is not enough. To strike a Kang is to invite total erasure. I want their holdings liquidated, their names scrubbed from every building, and their son blacklisted from every institution in the hemisphere. Blood for blood, Joon-Seok. Do not be soft." Joon-Seok watched the surveillance footage of the slap one last time. His jaw tightened. His hand hovered over the phone to give the final order that would send the Whitmore family into literal destitution. "I agree," he murmured, the darkness in him rising to meet his father's expectations. "I'll bury them." "No, you won't." The voice was quiet, but it carried more weight than the chairman's roar. Nia stood in the doorway, her lips still swollen, a small butterfly bandage marking the spot where the diamond had torn her skin. She walked toward him, her eyes steady and devoid of the malice that was currently poisoning the room. "She deserves to lose it all, Nia," Joon-Seok said, his voice dropping to a protective growl. "She humiliated you. She tried to destroy your career." Nia placed her hand over his, pulling it away from the phone. "If you destroy her entirely, you're just using your power the same way she used hers. You're just a bigger version of Margaret Whitmore." She looked at the screen where the chairman waited, his expression souring. "Chairman, if you erase them, you just create a vacuum. But if we force change, we create a legacy." She turned back to Joon-Seok. "I don't want her blood. I want the hospital reformed. I want the donor-first policy dismantled. I want a foundation for nurse safety established in her name, funded by her remaining assets. Let her live to see the world she looked down on become the world she has to serve. Joon-Seok looked at her, the heat of his anger cooling under her touch. He saw the difference then. His father dealt in destruction, Nia dealt in purpose. One was a cycle of violence, the other was a path to something enduring. Slowly, he looked back at the screen. The chairman wants blood, he said, his voice regaining its steel but losing its cruelty. But I work for Nia now. We aren't going to break Margaret. We're going to rebuild the system that allowed her to exist. He ended the call before his father could protest. The revenge was over. The work was just beginning. The transformation of New York Presbyterian began not with a wrecking ball, but with a signature. Dr. Elias Monroe was gone before the weekend ended, his political smile replaced by a grimace as he was escorted from the premises following a board-enforced resignation. The legal hammer did not crush Margaret Whitmore into a prison cell, but it stripped her of the shield her money had always provided. Convicted of witness tampering and assault, her sentence was served in the very corridors she once paced with such arrogance. 3,000 hours of mandatory community service, wearing a fluorescent vest and cleaning the floors of the clinics she used to ignore. She was no longer a donor, she was a cautionary tale, a ghost of the elite wandering a world that had moved on without her. In the vacuum left by the old guard, a new entity emerged. An anonymous endowment, larger than any Margaret had ever boasted, funded the establishment of the Okafor Community Trauma Center. It was a facility built on the radical idea that a patient's pulse mattered more than their portfolio. When the doors opened, the staff didn't see a hospital director in a stiff suit, they saw Nia. She had traded her scrubs for the responsibilities of leadership, but she still walked the ER floor every morning. She made sure the triage protocols were written in stone, ensuring that no nurse would ever have to choose between their safety and their paycheck again. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during the clinic's dedication ceremony. For years, Joon-Seok had been a name whispered in shadows, a phantom of the financial markets. But as Nia stood at the podium, he stepped out of the black sedan and walked toward the light of the cameras. He didn't stand in front of her, he stood beside her. He wasn't there as a billionaire enforcing a whim, but as a partner supporting a vision. The press scrambled, their flashes illuminating a man who had once buried his enemies in silence but was now choosing to build in the loud, messy reality of the public eye. He looked at Nia, not at the faint, fading scar on her lip, but at the fire in her eyes. The 72 hours had long since passed. The ruins of Margaret's life had been cleared away, and in their place stood something far more resilient than an empire. It was a sanctuary. As Nia took his hand, the message to the city was clear: the era of the untouchable was over. The era of the essential had begun. The sun dipped low over a modest garden in Brooklyn, casting long, golden shadows across a gathering that looked nothing like a merger, and everything like a family. There were no flashing cameras here, no towering floral arrangements that cost more than a mid-sized sedan, and no security details blocking the sidewalk. Instead, the air smelled of honeysuckle and home-cooked jollof rice. Joon-Seok stood at the altar, his bespoke suit the only nod to his former world, but his eyes were fixed solely on the woman walking toward him. Nia wore a simple white dress of structured lace, elegant, unpretentious, and entirely her own. The most jarring sight wasn't the billionaire groom, but the man seated in the front row. Chairman Kang, a man who usually moved like a glacier, stood up as Nia's mother approached. In a gesture that would have sent shockwaves through the boardrooms of Seoul, the titan of industry lowered his head and bowed deeply. It wasn't a bow of condescension, but one of profound respect for the woman who had raised a daughter strong enough to tame the fire of the Kang legacy. It was an admission that wealth was a hollow thing without the character to steer it. When Nia finally reached Joon-Seok, she didn't look back at the chaos of the last few months. She didn't think of the slap, the blood, or the cold office of Dr. Monroe. She looked at the man who had learned that true strength wasn't found in the ability to crush, but in the courage to protect. As they exchanged rings, simple gold bands without the ostentation of 3-carat diamonds, The silence of the garden felt more powerful than any boardroom shout. Later, as the stars began to poke through the New York twilight, Joon-Seok leaned in, his thumb tracing the place where her scar had once been. "I would have leveled the world for you," he whispered. Nia smiled, a quiet, radiant thing that outshone any jewel. She looked out at the guests, nurses from her unit laughing with executives, neighbors sharing stories with tech moguls, all gathered in a space built on mutual respect rather than fear. She realized then that the cycle had truly been broken. "Power doesn't raise its hand," Nia said softly, her voice carrying the weight of a new era. "It builds." If this story touched your heart, don't let the journey end here. We tell these stories to remind us that justice is possible and that kindness is the ultimate power move. If you believe in standing up for those who can't and building a world where character outweighs a bank account, please hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell. Drop a "I believe in building" in the comments below to show your support. Your engagement helps us bring more of these stories to life. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice is your power. Use it well.